The starward Hope shook again. A deep groan echoed through the metal bones of the ship, a sound of pain. On the main screen, the view of space was not peaceful. It was full of flashing lights and moving shadows. The lights were the last shots from the Coalition ships. The shadows were the enemy. Commander Jin held on to the command chair. His knuckles were white. His face was tight, but his eyes were calm. He had to be calm. Everyone was watching him. Next to him, his tactical officer Mira spoke. Her voice was quick and clear, but he could hear the fear underneath. Shields at 18%. The stone shell cruiser Guardian's Claw is gone. The Florian medical frigate Blossom is trying to retreat, but 2 Vorax steamships are on it. Jin did not look away from the screen. Order all remaining ships to fall back to the rally point. Tightened formation. We make our stand here? Here was the edge of the Kyrios Nebula. The purple and blue gas clouds were supposed to hide them. They were supposed to be a shield. It was a bad plan, but it was the last plan. The Vorax did not care about nebulas. The Vorax did not care about hiding. They only cared about eating. They were like a storm of locusts made of black chitin and sharp claws, and they ate everything alive. Another hit. The lights on the bridge flickered. A console near the back sparked, and a young officer named Jay let out a short cry before putting the fire out with a glove. "Report," Jin said. "The forward shield generator is failing," Mira said. Her fingers flew over her screen. "The Vorax hive ship is moving into attack position. It's opening its primary maw." On the screen, the massive enemy ship, looking like a rotten, spiky seed pod, began to glow from a huge opening at its front. A green, ugly light built up inside it. That was the end. That weapon would crack the Starward Hope open like an egg. Jin looked around his bridge. He saw the faces of his crew. Pilot Min was sweating, her hands gripping the controls. Comms Officer Bin had his eyes closed for a second, his lips moving in a silent prayer to his ancestors. They were all so young. They had joined the Galactic Coalition to explore stars, to meet new species, not to die in the dark, eaten by bugs. He thought of his home. Not the big, busy Coalition hub world, but the small green planet where he was born. He thought of the quiet hills and the wide, slow river. He promised himself he would not die today. He promised his crew they would not die today. "Myra," he said, his voice low, "open the priority channel. The one we were given. The old frequency." Myra looked at him, her eyes wide. "The human frequency?" "Commander, they have never answered. Not in 20 cycles of war. It's a legend. A story we tell to feel better." "Do it," Jin said. There was no other choice. Mira worked quickly. She opened a special communications panel. It was simple, not like the fancy systems. It was for one signal only. Jin took a deep breath. He spoke clearly, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "This is Commander Jin of the Galactic Coalition vessel Starward Hope. We are engaged at the Kyrios Nebula defensive line. Our position is being overrun by Vorax Swarm Delta 7. Our shields are failing. We request immediate assistance. We are invoking the Treaty of Soul, Article 1, Mutual Defense Against Existential Threats." He paused. The green light on the Vorax hive ship was getting brighter. It was almost ready to fire. "The galaxy remembers your promise," Jin added, the formal words feeling strange in his mouth. "The children of the Coalition call for the Guardians of Soul. Please." He nodded to Myra. She sent the signal. It was a simple pulse of data, and his voice shot out into the darkness on a frequency humans had given the galaxy long ago. A frequency no one ever used, because no one had ever seen a human ship. For a moment, there was only the hum of the failing engines and the beeping of warning lights. Nothing happened. Then The Vorax hive ship fired. A thick beam of sickly green energy shot across space. It hit the Starward Hope's weakened shields. The shields flashed bright white, screamed in protest, and then vanished. The beam struck the ship's hull. The world exploded in noise and light. Jin was thrown from his chair. He hit the deck hard. The air knocked from his lungs. Alarms screamed. The main screen shattered. Red emergency lights were the only thing fighting the darkness. He could smell smoke and something sweet and terrible burning wires. He pushed himself up. "Report, Mira." Mira was pulling herself up by her console. Her forehead was cut, a line of blood running down her temple. "Primary power is gone. Engines are dead. Life support is on backup. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5. We're leaking air." Jin stumbled to the broken main viewer. The external cameras were still working on one side. He saw the Vorax hive ship. It was turning, getting ready to finish them with its smaller weapons. He saw the other coalition ships, small and brave, trying to draw fire away from the flagship. They were being picked apart, one by one. He looked at his crew. They were hurt. They were scared. But they were still at their posts, looking at him, waiting for an order. For hope that he had no more orders. He had sent the only hope he had out on an ancient radio wave. He opened his mouth to tell them to abandon ship, to try for the escape pods, though he knew the Vorax would likely shoot them down. Before he could speak, Pilot Min shouted. Her voice was not scared anymore. It was confused. "Commander, the long-range scanner? It's reading something. What is it? More Vorax?" "No," Min said, her eyes wide as she stared at her screen. "It's not like anything. It's at the edge of the system. Space itself. It's folding." Jin rushed to her station, leaning over her shoulder. On the scanner display, the normal lines of space-time were bending, not with the tear of a coalition warp drive or the ugly hole of a Vorax tunnel. This was neat, precise, like someone was folding a piece of paper with a sharp crease. One fold appeared, then another, then 6 more. 8 perfect, silent distortions in reality. And from these silent folds, ships began to emerge. His ship slid into normal space without a sound. There was no roar of engines, no flash of displaced energy. One moment there was nothing, and the next, the ships were simply there. They hung in the dark, silhouetted against the distant glow of the nebula. On the bridge of the human command vessel, CV-01 Chang'an, the silence was a tool. The air was cool and still. The light was soft, coming from panels in the walls and floors. There were no loud alarms, no shouting officers. Only the quiet hum of perfect machinery and the faint glow of data streams, floating in the air above workstations. Admiral Day stood in the center of the bridge. He was not a tall man, but he stood very straight. He wore a simple, dark uniform without medals or ribbons. His hands were clasped behind his back. His eyes moved across the main display, which showed the battlefield in perfect, terrible detail. He saw the broken coalition ships, their signals flickering like dying candles. He saw the swirling, chaotic mass of the Vorax swarm, a blight of red icons on the clean map. He saw the Vorax hive ship, a pulsing, ugly core of the infection, turning its weapons on the largest coalition vessel. His face showed nothing. No anger, no excitement, no fear. It was the calm face of a gardener who has found a nest of poisonous insects in his yard. There was a job to do. To his right, Commander Sue watched her own set of displays. Her focus was on logistics, on systems, on the cold math of the situation. The Vorax swarm numbers 8,422 individual biosignatures, she said, her voice quiet and even. The hive ship is a Class 9 standard configuration. Coalition forces have suffered 73% casualties. The flagship is critically damaged and has lost propulsion. Day gave a single slow nod. Identification confirmed on the flagship? Sue checked. Galactic Coalition vessel Starward Hope. Life signs are fading but present. They are the source of the distress call on the Sol frequency. Another nod. Day's eyes narrowed slightly as he watched the hive ship begin to fire its secondary batteries. Small, angry lines of green light reached out towards the crippled Starward Hope. They sparked against its bare hull, peeling away armor. Time until Coalition flagship is destroyed? Day asked. Estimated 3 minutes, based on current damage rates. Sue replied. On Day's other side, the tactical officer, a young man named Tay, spoke up. The swarm is detecting us. A scout wing is breaking off to investigate. On the display, a cloud of several hundred red dots shifted direction, moving away from the main battle and towards the silent human fleet. Order of battle? Day asked, his eyes still fixed on the hive ship. Tay's fingers moved through a holographic menu. Recommendation. Cleansing protocol. Theta. It is the most efficient for a bioswarm of this density in proximity to disabled friendlies. Day was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the soft whisper of air from the vents. He watched the Vorax scouts getting closer. He watched the Starward Hope take another hit. A small internal explosion lit up one of its engine pods. Execute, Day said. The word was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was an instruction, simple and clear. The change on the bridge was subtle. A soft blue light pulsed once along the edges of the room. On every station, certain controls lit up with a new authorization. The quiet hum of the ship deepened just a little. Initiating cleansing protocol Theta, Tay confirmed. All vessels synchronize. Deploy in pattern Sierra 7. Outside, the human fleet began to move. There were 8 ships in total. They did not turn or bank like normal ships. They simply changed direction, gliding forward as if space were a flat sheet of ice. They accelerated faster than anything the Coalition had ever built, moving without fire or thrust. The Vorax scout wing met them first. The insectoid ships, shaped like sharp, broken teeth, opened fire. Bolts of corrosive plasma shot across the void. They struck the lead human ship, a cruiser designated Sentinel-3. The plasma did not explode. It did not burn. It simply spread out and faded, like water hitting an invisible wall. The human ship's smooth, gray hull showed no mark. It did not return fire. It did not change course. Instead, from its underside, a panel slid open. A device emerged. It was not a gun. It looked like a complex silver flower made of crystal and metal. It began to spin silently. A sphere of distortion, visible only as a heat haze ripple, bloomed from the flower and shot towards the Vorax scouts. Where it touched a Vorax ship, the ship did not blow up. It crumpled. It was as if an invisible giant hand had grabbed it and crushed it into a tiny, dense ball of scrap. Then the ball vanished. 10 scouts were gone in less than a second, erased from space. On the Chang'an, Sue monitored the energy readings. Gravity Lancer deployment successful. Target mass eliminated. 0 debris. Meanwhile, other human ships reached the edges of the main swarm. From one ship, a fine, glittering mist poured out. It looked beautiful, like silver dust caught in sunlight. This was the Nanic dispersal field. It drifted gently into the heart of the Vorax formation. A Vorax cruiser, larger than the scouts, flew into the cloud. For a second, nothing happened. Then, its black chitin shell began to turn gray. The gray spread fast, like frost on a window. The ship stopped moving. Then it started to come apart. It did not shatter. It silently dissolved, breaking into smaller and smaller pieces until there was only a fading cloud of metallic dust where a warship had been. The dust then winked out, the nanites deactivating, swarm density decreasing by 12% per second, Tay reported, his voice still calm. Hive ship is attempting to disengage. It is launching all remaining drones as a screen. The massive hive ship began to turn, its green glow dimming. It was trying to run, to open one of its ugly warp tunnels. Thousands of its remaining drones surged forward in a desperate, suicidal wave to block the human advance. Admiral Day watched this. He saw the panic in the enemy's movement. It was the first sign of something like emotion he had seen from them. He tilted his head. "Focus on the hive ship," he said. "Use the anchors. Clean the area." "Yes, Admiral," Tay said. Two human ships moved ahead of the others. From their projects, beams of soft, white light lanced out. They did not strike the drones. They intersected in space around the hive ship and the densest part of the swarm. Where the beams met, space froze. It was the only way to describe it. A giant, perfect cube of space, containing the hive ship and several hundred drones, simply stopped. The ships inside were caught in mid-turn, mid-burst, like insects in amber. The light from their engines and weapons was frozen. The cube shimmered with a faint, internal light. Then, the cube folded. It twisted in on itself in a way the eye could not follow. It was a soft flash, not bright, but deep. When it was gone, the cube of space was empty. Perfectly, utterly empty. No debris. No energy. Nothing. The hive ship and its protectors had been neatly cut out of reality. The remaining Vorax drones, now leaderless and confused, milled about for a moment. The human fleet continued its silent, graceful movement through them. Silver dust clouds bloomed. Ripples of gravity twisted and crushed. Beams of white light carved out more cubes of space and removed them. In less than a minute, the battlefield was clean. The red swarm of icons on the Chang'un's display was gone. Only the faint, friendly green icons of the Coalition survivors remained, floating helplessly in the sudden, immense quiet. Admiral Day unclasped his hands. "Cease protocol," he said. "Status of the Coalition flagship?" Sue checked. "The Starward Hope is severely damaged, but intact. Life signs are stable. They have suffered no new hits in the last 80 seconds. They let out a small breath, the first sign of any effort. Open a channel to them. Standard greeting frequency. And prepare the medical and engineering teams. We will offer assistance." He finally turned from the main screen and looked at Commander Sue. Her face was also calm, but he saw the slight tension around her eyes. It was the same tension he felt. The job was done. The garden was clean. But now they had to talk to the people who had seen them do it. They had to explain the unexplainable. Send the message, they said. The silence was the loudest thing Commander Jin had ever heard. One moment, the universe had been a riot of noise, the scream of metal, the hiss of escaping air, the frantic shouts of his crew, the deep thrum of enemy weapons. Then it all stopped. He pulled himself up, using a broken console for support. The bridge was a wreck, lit by the ugly red of emergency lights and the sparks from torn wiring. But the ship was no longer shaking. He looked at the main viewer. The external camera was cracked, but it still worked. Where the massive, terrifying Vorax hive ship had been, there was nothing. Just empty space and the distant swirl of the nebula. He blinked, thinking his eyes were hurt, but the emptiness remained. He scanned the view. The thousands of smaller Vorax ships, the stingers and cruisers that had filled the space around them like a cloud of gnats. They were gone too. Not destroyed in a normal way. Not floating as wreckage. Just gone. Myra stumbled to his side, her hand pressed to the cut on her forehead. She stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open. What happened? Jin had no answer. His eyes moved to the new ships. They hung in the void, motionless now. They were smooth and angular, their surfaces a dull gray that seemed to drink the light. They didn't look like warships. They looked like tombstones. Are they ours? Pilot Min whispered from her station, her voice full of hope and confusion. Before Jin could answer, the communication console beeped. It was a soft, clean sound, very different from their own system's frantic alerts. Bin, the comms officer, looked over, his face pale. Commander, we're receiving a transmission. On a wide band. It's for everyone. Put it on speaker, Jin said, his throat tight. There was a slight hum, then a voice filled the bridge. It was a man's voice. It was calm, clear, and utterly without emotion. It spoke in perfect galactic common to all Galactic Coalition vessels. This is Admiral Day of the Human Soul Defense Fleet. The Vorax swarm in this sector has been neutralized. Please hold your positions. Do not engage your drives. We are scanning for residual biohazards. Medical and engineering assistance will be dispatched shortly. Please respond with your status. The message ended. The silence returned, but now it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of shock. They're human, Mira breathed. She looked at Jin, her eyes wide. The old treaty? The signal. It worked. Jin felt a flood of relief so powerful his knees went weak. They were saved. But that relief was chased immediately by a cold, crawling feeling of awe. He had just watched a war end in less time than it took to eat a meal. He had seen a hive ship that had withstood the Coalition's entire Fourth Fleet for days simply. Deleted. Respond, he said to Bin. Tell them. Thank them. Tell them the Starward Hope is crippled. We have many wounded. Life support is failing. As Bin sent the message, Jin turned back to the viewer. He zoomed in on one of the human ships. It was closer now, moving towards them with that same silent, gliding motion. It didn't seem to have engines. It didn't seem to have weapons ports. It was just a shape, moving through the dark. What did they do? Min asked, her voice small. I saw the Vorax ships just crumple. Like paper. And the silver dust. The ones it touched fell apart. And the light, Myra added, her tactical mind trying and failing to process it. The white light that made that cube. And then the cube was just empty. Jin listened to his crew. They were trying to understand, to put words to weapons that had no words in their language. He realized they weren't talking about a battle. They were talking about an extermination, a cleaning. On the screen, a smaller vessel detached from the human command ship. It was a simple shuttle, shaped like a rounded wedge. It flew smoothly towards the Starward Hope. A moment later, another message came from Admiral Day. Coalition vessel Starward Hope. We are sending a triage and assessment team. Please prepare your main airlock for hard dock. We will stabilize your core systems first. The human shuttle connected to their airlock without a sound. The docking seal is perfect on the first try. A few minutes later, the door to the bridge opened. 3 humans walked in. They wore sleek, form-fitting environment suits, but their helmets were off. They carried small, unmarked cases. The one in front was a woman. She had short, dark hair and a calm face. She looked around the smoky, broken bridge, her eyes taking in the wounded crew, the blood on the deck, the sparks. There was no disgust on her face, no surprise, just a quiet, professional assessment. I am Liaison Officer Hana, she said, her voice softer than Admiral Day's, but just as clear. My team is here to help. Where are your most critically injured? Jin pointed to the side of the bridge, where 2 crew members lay on makeshift cots, being tended by a medic with burned hands. There, our medical bay lost pressure. Hana nodded. She and her 2 companions moved. They did not run. They walked quickly and purposefully. They opened their cases. Inside were devices Jin had never seen. One man held a small wand over a wounded officer whose leg was badly cut. A soft blue light came from the wand. The bleeding stopped instantly, and the wound began to close, the skin knitting together without a scar, right before their eyes. The other human went to a damaged console. He placed a flat, palm-sized patch on the blackened surface. The patch glowed, and lines of light spread out from it like veins. The console flickered, then came back to life, its screens showing normal readouts. Mira watched, utterly fascinated. How does that work? The human at the console glanced at her. Self-repairing nanocircuitry. It will restore basic functions. It will not fix the structural damage. He spoke as if explaining that water was wet. Jin walked over to Hana, who was now checking the vitals of his unconscious communications officer. Your fleet. He began, struggling for the right words. What you did out there. We have fought the Vorax for generations. We have never seen anything like that. Hana finished her scan and looked up at him. Her expression was polite, but her eyes were distant, as if she were remembering something. The Vorax are a consuming swarm. You fight them ship to ship. You try to outshoot them. This gives them time to adapt, to spread. She stood up. We do not fight them. We remove the infection, quickly, before it can think. With what? Jin asked, his voice almost a whisper. What were those weapons? Hana considered for a moment, as if deciding how much to say. Tools, she said finally, for specific tasks. The gravity lancers crush. The nano-dispersal breaks down. The reality anchors contain, can delete. They are only for threats like the Vorax. She paused, looking at the stunned faces of the coalition crew around her. You are safe now. That is what matters. But as she turned back to her work, Jin understood. Her words were kind, but the meaning was cold. Humanity did not have a navy for war. They had a sanitation fleet for pests. And they had just looked at the greatest threat the coalition had ever known and seen. Nothing more than a pest to be sanitized. The relief he felt was still there. His people would live. But it was now mixed with a new, profound feeling. It was the feeling you get when you see a mountain moved by a giant's hand. You are thankful the rock is gone from your path, but you cannot stop staring at the hand. The human shuttle was quiet. It smelled clean, like ozone and cool metal. There was no vibration, no sense of movement at all. Commander Jin sat beside Mira, both of them still in their stained and torn uniforms. They watched the smooth, blank wall in front of them, knowing that on the other side, the human command ship grew larger. Liaison Officer Hana sat across from them. She was calm. She had offered them water and a simple nutrient bar, which they had eaten without tasting. Now she was looking at a small data pad, her fingers moving silently over its surface. Admiral Day has asked to speak with you, she said, not looking up. He wishes to discuss the transition of the sector back to your control. Jin nodded. He had many questions, but they felt too big, too dangerous to ask in this small, quiet shuttle. Instead, he asked a simple one. Your ship, the Chang'an. What does it mean? Hana looked up. A small, almost invisible smile touched her lips. It is an old word. From an old language on Earth, it means general, a leader of soldiers. The shuttle connected to the larger ship. There was no clang, no hiss of equalizing pressure. A door simply slid open, revealing a corridor. The light was soft and white. The floor was a dull gray material that felt slightly soft under Jin's boots, absorbing sound. The walls were smooth and featureless. Hana led them through the ship. They passed a few other humans. Each one wore the same simple, dark uniform. Each one nodded politely, but did not stop to talk. Their expressions were focused, calm. There was no laughter, no raised voices. The ship was a place of purpose, not of life. They entered a room that was not a bridge. It was smaller. A round table made of a dark wood-like material stood in the center. There were no view screens showing stars. Instead, the walls displayed a slow, gentle image of a forest on earth-tall green trees moving in a breeze, sunlight filtering through leaves. The sound of rustling leaves and distant birds was very low, almost not there. Admiral Day stood by the table. He was as Jin had pictured him from his voice, not tall, with short gray hair and a face that showed nothing. He did not smile. He gave a short, formal bow of his head. "Commander Jin, Officer Mira, please sit." They sat. The chairs were comfortable, molding to support them. A young man brought in a tray. On it was a simple ceramic pot and 3 small cups. He poured a pale green liquid. Steam rose, carrying a gentle, grassy smell. "Tea," they said. "It helps with shock." Jin took the cup. The warmth was real in his cold hands. He took a sip. It was bitter, then sweet. He had never tasted anything like it. For a moment, the simple act of drinking something warm made the nightmare feel distant. "Your people," Jin began, putting the cup down. "Your doctors. They saved many of my crew. They fixed things on my ship we thought were dead. We owe you our lives. The entire coalition owes you a debt we can never repay." Day listened. He took a slow sip of his own tea. "There is no debt," he said. "The Treaty of Soul was a promise. We do not break our promises." "But you never came before," Myra said, her voice sharper than she intended. She flushed, but Day did not seem offended. "We monitor many sectors," he said. "The Vorax swarm you faced, Delta 7, was new. It had not reached a critical mass before. Our thresholds for intervention are high. Why?" Jin asked. The question hung in the air. If you have this power, why let the war go on for so long? Why let so many of us die? Day looked at him. His eyes were dark and very deep. For the first time, Jin saw something in them. It was not anger. It was something older. It was sadness. "Power is not a toy, Commander," Day said softly. "It is a responsibility. A terrible one. What you saw today are not weapons of war. They are tools of last resort. They do not discriminate. They leave nothing behind. To use them is to make a choice that can never be unmade." He paused, looking into his tea. "A long time ago, we were like you. We fought a war against an enemy that was not like us. An enemy that wanted only to consume, to turn our worlds into silent, dead rock. We fought them with lasers and missiles and courage. We lost world after world. We lost billions of people. The forest on the walls seemed to grow darker, as if a cloud had passed over the sun. We learned." Day continued, his voice a low murmur. "We learned that courage is not enough. That honor means nothing to a thing that only wants to eat. We had to become something else to survive. We had to learn to clean, not to fight. The tools you saw, they came from that dark time, from our own pain. We do not use them lightly. We only use them when the infection is sure, and the cost of waiting is greater than the cost of acting." The room was silent except for the faint sound of digital birds. "You saw the Vorax as an enemy to be defeated," they said. "We see them as a disease to be cured. It is a different way of thinking. It is not better. It is just what was necessary for us to live. Jin understood now. The silence of their ships, the calm on their faces, the lack of celebration. This was not a victory for them. It was a surgical procedure. A grim, necessary task. So what happens now? Mira asked. Will you stay? Will you help us rebuild? Day shook his head. Our place is not here. Our place is on the edges. There are other quiet zones, other shadows where things like the Vorax begin. We watch them. We contain them. We prevent so that civilizations like yours do not have to become like us. He set his cup down. We will leave once your fleet is stable. We have shared basic schematics for neutralizing Vorax biosignatures with your engineers. It is a simple frequency emitter. It will keep any remaining spores dormant. You can clean your own worlds in time your own way. He stood up. Jin and Myra stood with him. You asked why we did not come sooner, they said. It is because we hope every time that you will find a way to solve the problem yourselves. That you will not need the cleaners. This time you called, and we came. But do not wish to be like us, Commander. Enjoy your tea. Enjoy your noisy ships and your arguments and your hope. They are signs of life. We are simply the quiet that keeps the darkness back. He bowed his head again. The meeting was over. As Hannah led them back to the shuttle, Jin looked once more at the peaceful forest on the walls. He realized it was not a celebration of their home. It was a memory. A quiet, fading memory of a life they had sacrificed so others could keep theirs. He stepped back into the shuttle, the weight of the Admiral's words sitting heavily on him. They had been saved by angels who carried the coldest fire he had ever seen. And he knew, as the door closed, that the galaxy had just become a much bigger and much stranger place. The human ships did not leave all at once. They worked for a full day, moving with that same silent efficiency. Their smaller craft flitted between the broken coalition vessels like worker bees. They sealed hull breaches with a shimmering gel that hardened into a material stronger than the original armor. They restored power grids with their strange, self-spreading patches. They healed wounds that would have been fatal. Commander Jin watched it all from the repaired bridge of the Starward Hope. His ship could move again. Slowly. Life support was steady. The wounded were stable, many already walking. It was a miracle, but it felt like a quiet, technical miracle. There was no joy in it, only the deep relief of a pain that has finally stopped. On his screen, he saw the human command ship, the Chang'an. It hung apart from the others, a silent gray sentinel. He thought of Admiral Day's words. We are simply the quiet that keeps the darkness back. Mira came to stand beside him. She had cleaned the blood from her face, and a thin, almost invisible line was all that remained of her cut, thanks to the human medical wand. The last of the engineering teams is returning to their shuttles, she reported. They've given us all the data for the Vorax neutralizer. It's surprisingly simple. Jin nodded. That was the final message. Not a grand alliance, not a promise of future aid. A set of instructions. A way to clean up the rest of the mess yourselves. What do we tell the coalition? Myra asked, her voice low. What do we say happened here? Jin looked at the main viewer. One by one, the human ships were turning. Not banking, but reorienting their entire forms smoothly in the void. At their edges, space began to waver, to fold. It was the same neat, silent process as their arrival. We tell them the truth, Jin said slowly. The humans came. They answered the old signal. They destroyed the Vorax swarm. They saved us. And then they left. They'll want more, Mira said. They'll want their technology, their weapons. They'll want to find them. And they will fail, Jin replied. a certainty settling in his bones. Did you see any drive signatures? Any energy trails to follow? Their FTL doesn't leave a path. It's a door that closes behind them. As he spoke, the first human ship, a cruiser, folded into itself. The space around it bent, twisted, and then snapped flat. The ship was gone. No flash. No ripple in subspace. Just emptiness. Then another ship went. And another. The Chang'an was the last. For a moment, it seemed to hold perfectly still. Jin wondered, briefly, if Admiral Day was looking back. Then, the space around the command ship began to pleat, like fabric being drawn together by an invisible thread. In a heartbeat, the great gray vessel was erased from the starfield. The battlefield was quiet again. But now it was a normal quiet. The quiet of space after a storm has passed. The broken, but now stable, coalition ships floated amidst a startling lack of debris. The Voraks were gone so completely, it was as if they had never been. A week later, Jin stood on the observation deck of a coalition space station. The Starward Hope was in dry dock for proper repairs. Reports were filed. Debriefings were held. The galaxy had erupted in celebration, then in frantic speculation. Everyone wanted to know about the humans. Philosophers debated the morality of their weapons. Historians dug up every scrap of the old Treaty of Seoul. Military planners drew up 1,000-page reports on the tactical implications. Their words full of terms like gravity manipulation and reality-level weaponry. They sounded foolish, Jin thought. Like children trying to describe a thunderstorm by talking about the sound of the rain. A young Florian diplomat, her petals flushed with excitement, floated over to him. Commander Jin, your first-hand account is invaluable. The consensus is eager to open formal relations. We must find a way to contact them, to learn from them. Think of the peace, the safety they could bring. Jin looked at her earnest, hopeful face. She saw saviors with wonderful technology. She did not see the quiet sadness in Admiral Day's eyes. She did not feel the cold precision of that clean, silent room. They don't want to be found, Jin said simply. And I don't think we should try. The Florian blinked, confused. Later, alone, Jin looked out at the stars. Myra found him there. She handed him a cup of something hot. It wasn't tea. It was too sweet. But it was warm. You're thinking about them, she said. Aren't you? He replied. Every day, she admitted. She joined him at the viewport. I keep going over the sensor logs. The way their weapons worked. It wasn't violence. It was erasure. It's more frightening than any war. That's what he meant, Jin said. Day. He said they had to become something else. Not soldiers, cleaners, guardians. He took a sip. We celebrate. We build statues. We tell stories of great battles. What do they do? What do they have out there on the edge? Mira was silent for a long time. Maybe they have the quiet, she finally said, and the memory of why the quiet is necessary. Jin thought of the forest on the wall of Day's room. A memory of a living world, played on a loop in the heart of a silent ship. It wasn't a decoration. It was a reminder. A reason. He realized then that the galaxy's story had changed. It was not a story of one great alliance anymore. It was a story of a bright, noisy, messy garden of civilizations. And far away, in the dark soil at the edge of the garden, there were quiet gardeners. They did not walk among the flowers. They stood watch at the fence, holding back the things that would devour it all. Their tools were terrible, born from their own ancient loss. They asked for no thanks. They wanted no company. The galaxy would sleep more safely tonight, and every night after, knowing a threat like the Voraks could be ended in moments. But it would also glance nervously at the dark between the stars. wondering what else was out there that required such quiet. Terrible guardians dot, and for the first time, Jin felt not just gratitude, but a new responsibility. To live well, to be the noise and the hope and the life that was worth guarding. To ensure that the sacrifice of those quiet sentinels in the dark, who had traded their own peace for the galaxies, was not in vain. He finished his drink and turned from the stars. There was work to do. His ship needed to be rebuilt. His crew needed to go home. Life, loud and complicated and beautiful, went on. And somewhere in the deep quiet, he knew, the human fleet continued its endless, silent watch.